Well, good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And it's great to see a packed house here this morning to listen to me speak. I'm really excited about that. You know, I'm always honored to speak in front of my colleagues, so it's great to be here this morning. Unfortunately, it's such a sad occasion in what we're talking about. I'd love to be talking about housing. I'd love to be talking about crime for sure. In fact, in Prince Albert and in my riding yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we had an emergency notice. Somebody was shot while they were stealing his truck. My thoughts go out to his family, and you know, these are serious events and serious things that we should be talking about, and we could be talking about if they'd only provide the evidence like you've instructed them to do. You know, Mr. Speaker, I got elected in 2008. I remember back in 2008, my colleague LeVar Payne, the member for Medicine Hat, he had a heckle. His heckle was really simple. Where's the $40 million? And I remember during QP, the Liberals would try to say something very distinguishable, and he'd just go say, where's the $40 million? And they go and they shrink down in their seats, and you know, they shrug away, and they couldn't answer his question. And of course, he did that for a year and a half, 2 years. Never did find out where that $40 million went to and how the Liberals took that money and used it for their own personal benefit. That was never really ever accounted for, and that money just kind of disappeared, and the Liberals kind of shrugged their shoulders, and on we go. But in the meantime, I think they went down to, what, 12 seats? Just a marginal numbers. Canadians were mad at the Liberal Party of Canada for what they had done. They kicked them out. They put in an honourable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. We've seen our economy turn around. We've seen strong management through a fiscal crisis in the global recession. We've seen growth in our communities even during the global recession. We've seen lift stations, we've seen water treatment plants, we've seen bridges, we've seen the Canada West Foundation program where we actually built infrastructure in Western Canada, in the ports. We're actually growing as a country. And by 2015, we're experiencing that boom of that growth by that solid stewardship of the economy and the responsible use of taxpayers' dollars. You know, I could do an announcement in my riding, and I could actually touch what was actually going to be built. If we said we're going to spend $20 million on a water treatment plant like we did in Prince Albert, I could take you there, Mr. Speaker, and show you that water treatment plant and show you the benefit of that water treatment plant. When we did bridges, we could actually take and drive a car across the bridge once it was completed. You know, those are the things that Canadians want us to do. They want responsible use of their funds. If they're going to trust us with their money, then we have a duty to ensure that we handle it with respect and dignity, and we take their trust seriously. $400 million. LeVar was saying $40 million. 18 years roughly later, it's $400 million. Why haven't the Liberals learned their lesson? You would think that they would have learned from then that that's a lot of money. They should not be taking that from taxpayers and abusing taxpayers' trust. And that's what they've done in regards to this $400 million fund. You know, it's disgusting because, like I said, we could be talking about or debating things like, let's say, housing. How many kids are living in their parents' basement right now? Did we talk about that this week? No. We could be talking about crime. We could be talking about what we need to do to get serious repeat offenders. We could be talking about how to deal with auto thefts. We could be talking about how to put violent offenders behind bars, make sure they don't get out and repeat offend. We could be talking about what we can do to stop crime. We could be talking about addictions and mental health. These are all things that Canadians want us here to talk about at this point in time, because these are things that they are concerned about. But what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the Liberals are snubbing Parliament. They're ignoring a direct order from you, Mr. Speaker, and I know you should be really upset, and I know you are upset, because they are challenging your authority over this body by not providing those documents. And what do? They shrug. Their arrogance just shows up. They just go, we don't care about Parliament. And that's obvious because they didn't care about the $400 million either. They just went and spent it as they wanted to spend it for their purposes, not for taxpayers' purposes. It resonates right through this whole government and how they conduct their business. It's never been about the people. It's never been about how I can help the people in British Columbia or help the people in Quebec. It's never been about how they can help the people in Atlantic Canada, how I can give them more prosperity, raise their standard of living. Let's look at what's happened under this government. Look at our GDP. Look at our standing in the G7. They are embarrassing. We've known for years now that the Port of Vancouver is one of the worst ports in the world. What has this government done? Have they invested in the port? Have they made changes? Have they looked at it and actually done a study to say that we got these types of actions that will actually make this port the best in the world? No, it's good enough. We're okay being at the bottom of the list. That's fine. Canadians don't think that's fine. Canadians are upset about that. And let's circle back to the $400 million that was actually squandered. Squandered. I would like to say stolen, but I don't think that's parliamentary, so I'll call it squandered. So if it was squandered, just think what you could do with that $400 million. How many police officers, how many RCMP officers could we put across Canada with $400 million? Think about that. That's quite a few. Think how we could improve our trading with $400 million. Think about how we can make more efficient our infrastructure and supply chains with proper investment of $400 million. In fact, if you did that with the private sector, that $400 million of investment could probably be $1.2 billion of actual investment that would have been on the ground, helping Canadians, improving Canadians' lives for the future and beyond. Would have been addressing issues for their kids and their grandkids. But what did they do? They squandered it. They actually ignored any type of governance. They put themselves in direct conflict of interest. What the Auditor General said, I think there's 186 direct conflict of interest that have been shown up in her study or his study. Think about it, 186. These are professional people managing a big fund, and they don't understand governance? I'm sorry, I don't buy that. They don't understand conflict of interest? Well, if they weren't sure, there's a person called the Ethics Commissioner. They could phone and they'd give you all sorts of advice on conflict of interest. There's all sorts of people that's what they do, is they actually help boards to avoid situations such as this. So if there was a desire within this group to avoid and to maintain purity in how they dispense that cash, and actually if they did what they were supposed to do with it, well then we'd probably be better off. And maybe that fund would have been a really good working fund. Maybe that would have had objectives that would have been met. But they decided to ignore that, and they ignored it willingly. In fact, their due diligence is lacking. In fact, if you were in a private sector and you had shareholders, and if they seen this type of activity, I don't think they'd get board of directors insurance, first of all. Secondly, I think the shareholders would sue them for basically neglect of their asset that they own shares in. But what does this government do? They probably gave them a bonus. Because we like doing that with other executives like the CBC. We give them bonuses when they don't meet their objectives, but that's fine. We'll just give them money. That's good. It's all good. No problem, right? No problem. Not my dollar. That's the problem. It's not my dollar. And they need to understand that. It's not their dollar. It's taxpayers' dollars. It's given to you in trust to make good decisions with. So again, come back. $400 million. What could I do with that? Mr. Speaker, that's a huge amount of money. That's crazy. It's actually so big, Canadians can't get their heads around it. And that's maybe a little bit surprising because they can't believe nobody would be that arrogant to try to get away with this. And then they can't believe that this government would be willing to back and protect these people by not providing the evidence and not letting the RCMP do their job. What's the arrogance in that scenario? What are you saying to Canadian taxpayers? Don't worry. Don't worry, it's fine. Look the other way. You know what? Don't worry about it, it's fine. You know, it's good that your kid lives with you in the basement. It's better for your family. You know, it's all good. Like, seriously, this is what the Liberals are thinking. And when these people are sitting around that table looking at projects, there was some probably really good projects that they could have funded, but because it didn't belong to a Liberal, or it didn't belong to one of their own companies, or a friend of theirs, it got ignored. Shameful. Darn right shameful. Darn right maddening. Because if you were doing your job right, if you put a group together to manage a fund like this, if it would have done its job, it could have really done some amazing things. Because that's a lot of money. But they didn't. And now we're here today, instead of talking about housing, instead of talking about crime, instead of talking about what we can do to fix the budget, balance the budget, bring our house in order, what are we doing? We're actually talking about the NDP Liberals' inability or unwillingness to give you or listen to you, Mr. Speaker, and take your orders seriously and provide the documents to the RCMP. I can't believe this. I can't believe they let this go on. This is very simple to fix. You know what? Paul Martin, during the ad scam, at least he brought together a group and they actually addressed it. It wasn't pretty for him. It was probably very uncomfortable. But I will give him credit. At least he did the honorable thing and tried to address it. You know, they changed financer. They brought in Ralph Guidale. You know, he was trying to get to the bottom of it too. I give him credit for trying. These guys aren't even trying. They don't want to try. They want to play conquer and divide, shine a light over here, nothing to look at here, move on. That's what they're doing. And that's so sad because Canadians have had enough of that type of activity here in Ottawa. That's why you see the Conservative Party sitting at 42% in the polls. Because Conservatives are talking to people. They're listening. People are saying, I want you to deal with the housing crisis. I want you to deal with crime. I want to make sure my taxes are being spent properly. I want you to make sure I have proper health care and proper funding of health care. You know, $400 million. How many MRIs could we have bought with $400 million? How many hospital beds could have been opened up with $400 million? What type of other benefits could we have provided Canadians with that $400 million? Again, use your imagination. It's substantially a large amount of people. You know, I go back to Mr. Payne. I'm sure he's sitting there and he's just shaking his head and he's saying, you know what? Liberals are liberals are liberals are liberal. And I still remember coming here before I was elected with a member. Actually, I ended up being a former MLA in Alberta, but we were with the wheat growers and the barley growers at the time. And he sat down with the Parliamentary Secretary of the Agriculture, who's a former member from Alpac, Mr. Easter, who I think is a fairly honorable person. I've worked with him and I've enjoyed working with him, and I wish him well in his retirement. But I remember Mr. Strankman saying to Mr. Easter as they were finishing up the meeting, shaking his hand and said, Wayne, it's getting really tough to see the difference between a Liberal and a criminal here in Ottawa. That was a quote from Mr. Strankman, and that's a very true quote. And I know Mr. Easter took it to heart. I know he was upset, as rightly so. But you know, I don't think he was mad at Mr. Strankman. I think he was mad at his own party. I think he was mad at the people that were pulling off this crap. I think he knew what was going on, or had suspicions of what's going on, and couldn't fix it himself. And he wanted to see change, but he was handcuffed because he couldn't do it. He knew it was going to hurt him. He knew it was going to hurt him both electoral and reputation-wise. I think that's why he was mad. He wasn't mad at the comment. He was mad that people were actually telling him what he already knew. And there should be Liberal members over there saying the same thing. They should be mad. And maybe there's 24 of them that are mad. Maybe that's part of the reason why they want a different leader. You know, they're looking at it and saying, not another one. And then when they actually go to caucus and want to ask questions out there, they're told, you didn't make the list this week. Well, how about next week? You're probably not going to make the list next week either. Can I talk about bubblegum? Sure, let's put that on the list. You can come up to the mic in the Liberal caucus and we'll talk about bubblegum. That's what's going on, and that's why you see the discontent amongst the Liberal Party, because they're being ignored. There's some honorable members, I believe, over there that would actually like to see this dealt with and actually like to get to the bottom of this. But because the leadership team are so heavily involved with it, and the friends of the leadership team may end up going to jail if they were to investigate it, may or may not, that's up to the courts to decide. And I think we should give them the evidence to see if the courts would decide that. That would be the honorable way of doing it. So here's the evidence. It goes to the courts. Court says, no, these people are innocent. I guess we'd have to accept that. That's what the courts do. But the courts might come back and say, yes, this is corruption. This is illegal. There's consequences to that. Well, you know what? That's what should happen then. There should be consequences to that. So it's really sad that that voice isn't being heard. You know, Conservatives have been giving everybody the opportunity to do the right thing here. You know, we've been talking to people here. We've been trying to be progressive and conciliatory, but we cannot forsake our values. We can't let corruption to go on. We cannot sit here and not call it out when we see it so blatantly. We can't let a Prime Minister who has unethical breaches over and over again get away with another one. Nor can we let him throw somebody else under a bus like he has done in the past with different cabinet ministers, who tend to happen to be female, by the way, Mr. Speaker, which again is very, very disrupting and discerning. You know, I go back to Saskatchewan, which I talked a little bit about what happened yesterday. You know, people are sitting there. They've been told to stay home. They were told to lock up. Don't pick up strangers. You know, those are scary things. And they're happening too often. Way too often. People are upset. We should be talking about that today. We should be talking about how do we prevent that from happening in the future. Those are the things we should be talking about, Mr. Speaker. You know, man, Mr. Speaker, it's really, really interesting. What do I have to say? Interesting would maybe not be the right word, but it is interesting that this is actually going on as long as it has. It is. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, it will continue to go on until they do the right thing. And they know what the right thing is to do. They have to provide the documents. They have to respect your judgment. If they're not going to respect your judgment now, what happens tomorrow? You make a judgment tomorrow and they don't respect you tomorrow. What does that mean? Or the day after? What does that mean? When does Parliament cease to function? When does Parliament actually not operate the way it's intended to operate? That's what's starting to be at stake here. We're no longer a Parliament that actually debates, criticizes, and debates back and forth, and goes into committee and has debates back and forth and bring in experts and witnesses, listening to their advice, and do a proper report, table in Parliament, get a response from the government. Parliament hasn't been doing that now for, 3 weeks? It's embarrassing. And they need to do the right thing so Parliament can get back on track to do what it needs to do. There's still things that need to be done. And if they can't come about to do that, and if they think this is okay, it's not, well, then they have one other option that would be honorable. And that is to go to the polls, to go to the Governor General, and dissolve Parliament and have a carbon tax election, Mr. Speaker. That is an option that they should strongly consider. If they think that they are so right, if they think their actions are so honorable and that Canadians don't care, then let's put it to the Canadians. Let's put it right to them. Let's ask them directly through a vote. Because that's really the ultimate in democracy. And I think Canadians would be very concerned if Parliament is sliding back and not functioning the way it is. So I think, again, the honorable thing for a Prime Minister, if he wanted to do something honorable, would be to actually go to the Governor General, dissolve Parliament, and call election, and then let the people decide. That's something that would be an end to all the stories. So they've got some options, Mr. Speaker. They do. They can take the documents, go to the RCMP, give them the boxes, step back, let the RCMP do their work. If there's criminal charges, let them progress. If it goes to court, let the courts do what they do. If they're found innocent, they're found innocent, which I don't think they will be, but I'm not going to prejudge it. If they're found guilty, then there's consequences that are paid. That's one option. Second option is, like I said, dissolve Parliament, go to the Governor General, put it in front of the people of Canada, let them decide, and they can tell the Liberal Party and the members here on what they think should happen. They can actually say to the people of Canada can speak, and they're the best spokesmen and they're the best judges that we have for our Parliament in a democracy. So let's go to them. Let's put it in front of them, even though they won't see all the information, because the Liberals will still hide it. But at least they'll look at the consequences, they'll look at the things that are surrounding the decision that's been made here. They'll look at the way Parliament's not functioning, and they'll make the changes that they see fit. But they'll make the changes so that Parliament operates again, so that it gets back talking about housing, crime, affordability, the things that really are there struggling with. Talk about the cost of groceries. Talk about the cost of basic necessities. Those are the things that they want us to be talking about today. They're ashamed of this Parliament. They're ashamed of this government. No question about it. It's showing in the polls. They're ashamed of the antics that this government's been playing here in Ottawa, and they want change. And they're going to get change. They're going to get a new Prime Minister. I strongly believe that. They're going to get an honorable person for a Prime Minister, somebody that will make change, who will respect their tax dollars, who will actually look in them in the eye and tell them what needs to be done and make the appropriate changes for their benefit. That's what we're going to see out of a new government. So I go back to my friend LeVar Payne and tell him today, there's hope. Just like there was in 2006 when they changed government then, there's hope coming here too now, LeVar. There's going to be a change in government. You're going to see honor brought back to the system. You're going to see respect for taxpayers' dollars. You're going to see a government focused on individuals and Canadians. Mr. Speaker, this has been an interesting morning. I wish we were talking about everything else but this, but I'm glad I had a chance to voice my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.